and there were multiple on the ground injured. We just spoke with a witness who told us he saw several on the ground injured. And police, of course, telling people now to stay away from that arena. Phil Black is covering the breaking news live in London. Phil, obviously, every moment here, police desperately trying to figure out what happened. We're trying to understand the motive here, if that's the right word to use, and, of course, to understand what happened here with fatalities. What are you able to tell us?
Yeah, we still, crucially, Aaron, do not know precisely what triggered this stampede-like scenes that we're seeing in the video that was recorded by terrified people as they were trying to escape Manchester Arena. Something has triggered that crush, that desperate need and terror to escape that venue en masse. And so as a result, well, you can hear it, you can see it. We're talking about around 20,000 people who are trapped in this, almost certainly vastly young people, teenagers, Ariana Grande fans. Something has happened that has triggered that sort of fear and panic. Reports from the scene, witnesses are talking about some sort of loud blast, possibly a series of blasts. But so far the police are not confirming that. They're talking about reports of an explosion. Their priority now is getting help to the people who need it so desperately. It is very likely from those scenes that we are seeing that, well, we know that people have been killed because the police have confirmed fatalities, but we don't know the numbers. But you can imagine from that crush-like scenario within that huge venue, everyone fearful and trying to exit there at once, it is very likely that people have been hurt. And crucially, we don't know how the fatalities have taken place, whether it is as a result of these reported explosions or in the crush, the stampede that followed. We're expecting more updates from the police shortly, but they've already given us the worst. This was a terrifying, deadly event. There have been fatalities. We're just waiting to hear how bad this was. Aaron.
And let me just ask you, Phil, at this time, what they're trying to just figure out the forensics here of what the explosion might have been, but we don't even know at this point what that was, right? I mean, obviously the first thing people think of when you think of Paris, you think of something like this, people think of terror. Obviously we have in no way, shape, or form at this moment any way to know if that's the case.
That's absolutely correct. I think it's very likely from the witness accounts that there was a blast of some kind, possibly two, as in a loud bang, a loud noise, something that triggered the fear, but we don't know the point of origin of that noise. And of course, these sorts of venues, these sorts of events, well, the security is incredibly tight. They're usually incredibly well organized. Both police and private security are usually used to manage crowds like this coming and going. Of course, bag searches take place. It's not a soft target in that sense if we're talking about the potential for some sort of terror-like event to have taken place here. So it's important to remember, we don't know what caused this, but we know the result. The result is around 20,000 people desperately scrambling to escape this venue en masse. It is a terrifying, fearful stampede-like scenario, and almost certainly they were all young people and children.
All right, Phil Black, thank you very much. As police there are trying to get answers, I want to go to Kiara Dauber. She was inside that arena, saw the explosion. Kiara, what did you see?
Yeah, they just started letting everyone out. The music had just gone off. There was a massive explosion. There was a bang. There was smoke coming up. Sorry. There was smoke coming up through the steps, and everyone was just screaming and shouting, saying that it could be a bomb. And there was people shouting for the kids. There were people shouting for the heart, trying to find people. And as we went out into the concourse, to get out of the arena, there was just bodies scattered about everywhere. And I just saw people's belongings on the floor. And we just ran. There was all the traffic was at a standstill, and we were just running through the roads. And it was just chaos. It was just...
Sarah, I'm so sorry. I know that you haven't even had a moment to process this, and you're coming on to share this. I appreciate that so much. When you walked through those tunnels, you're saying you saw a lot of people who were lying down.
Yeah, there was at least 20, 30 people on the floor. Some that you could see straight off were just dead. You could just see that they were just passed away. There was some people with injuries. There was a few, there was a guy, or there was a husband that holding, what looked like his wife, and she wasn't in a good state.
And from where you were, Kiara, those people, could you tell sort of, did it look like it had happened sort of in the stampede, or was this near where the explosion may have happened? Were you even able to tell as you went by?
There was blood everywhere. It wasn't in the stampede because there wasn't that many people out at that minute. It was just as we opened the door to get out of the arena, as they were letting people out.
And there was blood.
Yeah, there was blood and people's shoes and handbags and bits of food and phones and it was just mad. It was just crazy.
And Kiara, was the people you were with, are they all safe?
Yeah, we're all safe. It's just a bit shook up at the minute. I don't think I'll ever get rid of the images.
Kiara, thank you so very much. I'm sorry. I know this is so hard. I am so glad for you that you're okay, but I know that at this moment is a mixed blessing as you think about what you have seen. Thank you so much for telling us about it.
You're welcome. I'm just hoping that everyone's fine who they were with, and that everyone. I just feel so sorry for the fatalities and the families of those affected.
All right, Kiara, thank you again so very much. I want to bring in now retired Army Major General Spider Marks, and I'm going to bring the rest of our panel in a moment on the other breaking news. But Spider, first, if I could just get your reaction to what we're learning here is happening in Manchester. You just heard Kiara there, who very bravely came on and spoke about what she saw, saying something that adds quite a bit to this very much a developing story. She says she saw 20 or 30 bodies on the floor of people that she believes were dead. She says that there was blood everywhere, all of their belongings. It didn't appear to her that this had happened in a stampede, but it's unclear at this time what this explosion might have been. When you listen to what she had to say, what's your takeaway about what is happening right now in the UK?
Well, clearly, Aaron, the immediate feed that we're all getting from CNN and other media outlets is clearly a scene of incredible destruction. I think all of the evidence will come out. The forensics will be extremely well done, but you have to start with a going-in proposition and assume the very worst with this. You have to assume that there's some degree of inspiration for this type of an event. Let's assume, let's discount, although that will happen through forensics, that this was an accident, this was gas that was released, this was spontaneous combustion of some sort. Let's assume that this was planned, that there were events leading up to this, and again, law enforcement will uncover all of this and we'll figure out where this goes. There has to be a very objective, as there is in circumstances like this, there will be a very objective view of what took place. In the totality of what has happened in Great Britain here over the course of the last month and a half, going back to the incident that occurred right outside Parliament, this is a concern that obviously this government wants to get its arms around, which then will lead to where we are with the vote that's coming up for Theresa May and her party. What does Brexit look like? So you take the totality of all of this. This is an incident. It's horrible. We'll get to the bottom of it. Then you look at the different discourses that will be coming forward in terms of where we are in terms of security in Great Britain specifically and in Europe, and then all this radical terrorism that we see.
All right, well, obviously it is the middle of the night in the UK. That does not stop the news here from breaking. We're going to continue to bring witnesses to you. We're going to continue to bring you more of the breaking news, but you just heard Kiara Dauber, who was there, just tell us as she was leaving the concert, she saw 20 or 30 bodies on the floor, and she said to her they were all clearly dead. There was blood everywhere. Calvin Wellsford joins me now. He was in the front row of the concert. Calvin, thank you very much for coming on and doing this. I know it's incredibly difficult, but you are the ones who are enabling us all to understand what just happened here. What did you see?
So I was front row at the concert, and I heard a big bang. I didn't know what it was, but I guess it was a bomb or a gun of some sort. And I turned around to see all of the crowd completely running and flying towards the stage where I was, because I was front row. And as I was there, I panicked and started to have an asthma attack and cry and scream. and I saw Ariana Grande's mom and her best friend run backstage, and a few other people just ran backstage because that was the exit. That was only a place to go without going up the steps. So I ran because I thought if I'm not in cover, I'll be safer. And I was taken in by one of her security people who asked if I was okay and wasn't really aware of what was happening. But I explained to her that I heard a sound which was like a bomb, and that everyone was running and crying, and she took my arm and took me aside and asked if I was okay, and then gave me to other security people who took me out of the thing, and then I ran.
And Calvin, we were just speaking to someone else who was there who said she had seen 20 or 30 bodies on the floor. Did you see anything like that?
I can't really remember. I completely blanked, and my thing was run. In my head, I was like, I need to get as far away as I can, and I completely blanked. I can't even remember anything after getting out of that arena.
All right, Calvin, thank you very much. Again, thank you for coming on. I know you're in shock, as so many others are. We continue our coverage here of the story. Dan Senor also joins us, spent time in Iraq, of course, and advising Mitt Romney as well. Dan, you know, when you look at something like this happening in the UK, and there are still so many details we don't know, right? These are just a few eyewitness accounts that we are putting together from people who are very much in shock. But you just heard that woman say 20 or 30 bodies. She saw a lot of blood. We just don't know at this point, but what we're hearing is horrific.
Right. So the human catastrophe of it, just in its raw form that we're hearing about, seeing images of, makes it hard to analyze these things. We hope it was not a terrorist attack.
Right.
Actually, we hope something exploded and people panicked, God forbid.
Right.
And that's, but
Exactly.
it tells you a lot about the climate in which we are in today, that something like this happens in Europe. 10, 15, 20 years ago, our minds wouldn't have immediately gone to a terrorist attack. Between France and Brussels and all these terrorist, UK, these terrorist attacks have been going on around the region. And this constant focus in political environments over the last several years on the 2+ million refugees that have come, into Europe via Germany, and now many of them have spread throughout Europe. Mm-hmm. and established or inserted themselves into communities that create infrastructure for terror. Whether that is this or not, that is where people's minds go. And as Spider said earlier, Theresa May's got an election coming up in a couple of weeks. She was the Home Secretary under Prime Minister Cameron. She was the equivalent of the Secretary of Homeland Security. She is regarded in the UK as having strong Homeland Security credentials. Immediately, these sorts of issues and various political leaders' credibility on them become a major factor.
So these, I just want to just everyone, as we're getting some new images here, these are the first images I'm going to show you right now coming in. These are still photos of some of the injured, as you can see. And General Marks, let me ask you, from what we're hearing from our witness, when she says 20 or 30 people, again, she says they were all clearly dead from what she could see. We have absolutely no idea at this point of the number of fatalities, although we do know there are fatalities. When she says there was blood everywhere, in your mind, does that make you think one thing versus another, or is that something that could easily have happened in a stampede that would have occurred for any reason?
No, I think what this leads you to, at least initially, the reports that we're getting out of the two eyewitnesses that you were able to bring on, is that it leads us to at least to an immediate thought that this was a single incident that occurred. There was an explosion of some sort. As Dan indicated, we don't know exactly what that is. Yeah. But that explosion then caused some immediate panic and immediate deaths, a bunch of destruction within a controlled area, and then you get the exits that are now being overwhelmed by humanity trying to get out of there. I think what you're looking at is too early to tell whether it's an act of terrorism, but there was some explosion that occurred. We'll figure out what that looks like. But I don't think this occurred in multiple locations. It wasn't synchronized where you had multiple attacks in multiple locations within that very enclosed arena.
No, it doesn't. At this point, there have been some reports, it's all eyewitness at this point, because we don't yet know, but of multiple explosions. But our eyewitnesses have only each spoken of hearing one, so for what that's worth. John, though, when you talk about this is one of the largest arenas in the UK, 20,000 people. It can fit 20,000, but a lot of the people who were there tonight, kids, teenagers, and particularly teenager girls here for this concert.
And that's what makes this especially horrific as we find out what the details are. The fact that so many teenagers and families were caught up in this is what makes it so especially horrific. You know, Manchester is a music mecca in England. It is, it is a city with a great music culture. And obviously the UK has dealt with terrorism going back to the days of the IRA. But as we get more information, the first thing is just the prayers we must all give out to the families and the teenagers and the children who may have been affected and caught up in this horrific event tonight.
And Dan, I think what you're raising here is whatever the cause may have been, is that now the first assumption is that something like this happened. And that's part of the reason people would have reacted the way they did. You know, someone who was on the show earlier who was there said, well, when I first heard there's a lot of big bangs and something like this, I may not have thought something of it. But then I did because of what has happened.
Just look at the coverage last week in New York City when the driver drove into Times Square. And immediately, where does everybody go to? Terrorist attack. Because actually, in several parts of the world, including in Israel, this is a common terror tactic now. Driving into a crowd of people.
We've seen that across Europe. That's just an example. Yeah.
So you don't need a sophisticated bomb-making capability anymore. It could be something quite simple as driving into Times Square. Who knows if this is actually a terror attack? What sparked this? But I just think this is where we in sort of the West go immediately whenever there's an incident like this. And it's, these are extremely turbulent times.
And one of the mantras of Homeland Security in the United States and I think around the world is you hope for the best, you prepare for the worst. And I think that applies to tonight.
And General Marks, how quickly do you think we're going to know what happened here? Obviously, we're now in just about not even 1 hour since we first heard of this, just about 1 hour. It doesn't matter what time it is in the UK. They're working every second that they can. How quickly do you think we will know what this was, whether it was terror or just some horrible accident that caused stampedes?
Within 6 hours, I think we'll know more. The priorities of work right now will be to care for the wounded, keep those alive, isolate the dead. Let's be objective about this. Isolate the area so you can begin to build the forensics. You make this thing as antiseptic as you can, and you start diving into it. So you'll have multiple teams that have rehearsed this over multiple times, unfortunately, that will be doing their tasks to ensure that within a short order of time, you at least have a sense of where you need to go to figure out how this thing occurred.
Dan.
And if it was a terror attack, they also have to keep an eye on what other public venues are potential targets and are vulnerable.
All of the above.
If there's, God forbid, if there's a sophisticated coordinated attack where you can hit multiple locations, so immediately keeping an eye on public transportation, any areas, venues that are highly concentrated with people. Whenever these attacks occur, if it is an attack, that's where law enforcement, Homeland Security, or the Home Office, in the case of the UK, goes.
Yeah, and I think, John, it's worth remembering, because I remember that afternoon, I think so many do, when the Paris attacks happened. Obviously, it was evening there, it was afternoon here. It did take a little while, probably just about the time we've had now, maybe a little bit less if I recall, but it was very quickly that they knew that something horrible had happened. Obviously, the details, took quite some time over the next few days to come out, but they knew it was terror.
Of course, and in that case, we had interconnected incidents, as Dan is expressing. One of the telltale signs is if there are detonations at different exits, for example, or multiple incidents across the city. There does not seem to be that in this case at Manchester. That's important, but that was certainly one of the telltale signs that made it definitive in Paris.
And General Marks, that is, I think, very important at this hour. Again, there could be more we don't know, but from what we're hearing from people who were there, is that there was one very large explosion. But the operative word, at least from what these eyewitnesses are saying, is one.
Exactly. What John just indicated is that we have, in this particular case, an adaptive threat. At Bataclan, what you had was folks with weapons, you had multiple explosions, etc. What you have here is obviously someone who learned from that and achieved an equal amount of destruction and the terror that individual wanted to put in place.
Yeah.
Again, we must assume that this is an act of terrorism, and then we'll take it from there because of the amount of resources that are available that go after something like this. We can back off if we find out that it's not. It's an accident. I doubt that.
All right, and as we get ready to hand it off, we have another eyewitness here just telling our show that he was there and heard 5 or 6 bangs. So as I said, very much piecing this together, it is very uncertain at this hour what it could have been. But this one's saying 5 or 6 bangs. Let's hand it off now for the continuing breaking news coverage with AC360.